Right, hayawi mwishowe huwa November 5th, the date many people have been waiting for is finally here. It is a big day in the United States. America decides the election day is today. Back home, this is the Morning Cafe. Tuko hapa kupatia kila kitu ambayo unahitaji asubuhi. My name is Freddy Ndebuli.
And the music truly Stanley Nyeringita, hotter than your coffee, is the tagline for Morning Cafe. It is 6 a.m. in Nairobi, Kenya. It is about 10 p.m. in New York City in the United States of America. Arguably, though, one of those days that historically is going to be a very, very big day for USA. For Kamala Harris, the vice president, if elected, she's going to be the first woman. If former President Donald Trump is going to be elected, or rather re-elected, he's going to be the oldest US president in that history. So a lot to discuss today, and right here at your home of Untold Stories, we're going to be breaking that down. And the gentleman to help us with that,
Joe Mutambo, former MP Mwingi Central, Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy expert, Gigi Kagombe, MP Gatundu South, and James Gakuya, MP Embakasi North. Our panelists this morning as we try and take a look at the headlines. And of course, the big headline today is the historic polls in the United States. But there's a lot more going on back home, including the Supreme Court marking 12 years since it was established. So,
munakuja sana. Stay on your lane.
Kila mtu akae kwa lane yake.
Yes.
All right.
Speaking of quotes, by the way, imagine this, friend. You marry someone, and then during the whole marriage you decide, mimi property yangu, mimi natafuta property yangu peke yangu. Kila mtu atafute property yake peke. Yes. And then a very slight mistake you do is you start kuomba mwingine pesa. Mwambie si unisaidie kujenga hii property. Yes. And then it becomes a matrimonial property. That is what we're going to be discussing today. Property ownership during marriage. We'll be breaking down what a prenuptial agreement is, because it's a conversation that Africans, Kenyans, really steer away from. So, tunazungumzia hayo maneno.
Silas Akiro, advocate of the High Court, will be in studio for that conversation.
Yes.
All right. A quick look at the headlines. The big one, historic polls. That's the Daily Nation today. The images there of the two main candidates, the Republican candidate Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, the vice president,
the
Democratic Party candidate.
Yes.
This is a big story on the Daily Nation.
And
Hapa ni Kenya.
Yes, and even as we continue in all dailies, apart from the Star, they have talked about, they have mentioned USA. That is going, that just goes to show how big it is.
Nani atatamba? Nani atatamba? Habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Maswala ya uchaguzi wa Marekani.
Justice on trial is a big headline on the front page of the Standard, what you're talking about. Yesterday, the Apex Court was marking 12 years, but then they also make space for the big conversation today up there. What's at stake as US goes to poll?
They didn't find it that important to put it smack on the front page. Like, that's a Standard. We'll be back to take a look at the 12 years of the Supreme Court later. The People Daily, that looks very different this week. The front page, 20 hospitals where you are likely to die. What kind of headline? Wow. So if you want to find out which hospital, if at all you're ever admitted in hospital where you're most likely to die, get yourself a copy of the People Daily. I love this. Say ineptitude.
Yeah, I love this headline because we were talking about this, I think it was it last week or the other week before, where Uganda had listed the hospitals that are doing poorly and also those that are doing very well. And we were talking about how we should see this in Kenya.
So as we start from the negative side, not talking about the best hospitals, it's where you're most likely to die.
So yes, they also make space for the America Decides.
Yes, we'll be back to take a look at that. Matters Business, IMF flags banks taking cheap CBK loans to invest in T-bills. So this is what's happening. Banks when come on a bit tricky. And we are seeing you. On the Star. Smart people read the Star. Yeah. Today is Tuesday, so it's a free copy of the Star that comes with the MyGov pullout. So they steer clear of any major conversation that we've been having. No Supreme Court on the front page, no US election.
No Kindiki.
No Kindiki, no Gachagua, so they decide to go with this one. 200 Bunge staff with fake papers sent home. This is a very interesting one, and possibly many more cheats will be sniffed out in ongoing crackdown. That's a big headline on the Star today. We cross the border to Uganda.
Arguably the best front page this morning in Uganda. They said on Daily Monitor, fear versus hope. I love the fact that apart from all other dailies, one, they've given a very extensive coverage on this story. Two, they highlight what it means for Uganda and the Ugandan officials.
How many pages? 3, 4, 5, 28, 29, and 36 pages dedicated to the news of the U.S. election in Uganda. They say, what are the PAL's interests? PAL, you know, Uganda is a PAL of Africa.
Yes.
So, rule of law, corruption fight, the Anti-Homosexuality Act. You know, that's a big, thorny issue in Uganda. So it could mean, you know, actually, it makes a very huge difference for Uganda, especially when it comes to those conversations about homosexuality.
On who wins. If Kamala Harris continues, then the status quo remains. If Donald Trump takes, then things might just change.
Foreign aid and security top the list of concerns many Ugandans are discussing as the Americans go to the ballot today to pick their next chief executive. On one hand, as Kamala Harris, 60 years old, Donald Trump, 78 years old, and they give their stance on different matters on the front page. It's a very nice balance on the front page.
That actually, for Donald Trump, they narrow it down to what it means for Uganda. And Trump, Uganda government officials largely avoided sanctions for gross violations and abuse of human rights and the rule of law. But Trump has previously used contemptuous remarks about third world countries and explicitly stated that immigrants from such countries should be banned. He
said Africa is that word. Anyway, meanwhile, Kamala Harris, under the Joe Biden and Harris administration, Ugandan public officials have suffered some of the severest sanctions over the passing of the Anti-Homosexuality Act last year, abuse of human rights, and being adversely mentioned for involvement in gross corruption.
Yes.
Do you remember the name of the speaker? We had to learn the name of the speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Because of some of these sanctions. Anita Among.
Yes.
That's a Daily Monitor. Okay. This is a new vision still in Uganda. The story about the US election is a small strip on the side here, how electoral colleges determine the winner. So they're going simply with an explainer of the US election system, the electoral college,
versus
what many people don't understand.
Votes as well.
Yeah. But the main story is something totally different. This is very local. Bibanja, government gives landlords new directive, moved in at preventing wrangles with tenants. So Bibanja are landlords, yeah? Okay.
I think Bibanja is somewhere, is a particular place. But then matters land for them is always a big news, and particularly in such areas. Muhozi ako pale, some eyes stronger military ties with Qatar. Interesting.
Tuvuke border tuingie Tanzania. On the Citizen, they're talking about matters crypto. Tanzanian lenders ready to adopt digital currency tech. Now, despite the Bank of Tanzania having not yet approved the use of cryptocurrencies or a central bank digital currency, some key players in the banking industry have expressed their readiness to adopt these technologies as soon as the necessary regulatory framework is in place. So yes, they're embracing the crypto.
They also make space for the U.S. elections today. Why today's U.S. election matters to Tanzanians.
And that's the question that everyone is asking.
What it matters to us.
Why should we be bothered?
Yes.
Now that we have it on our front pages, what is there? What is at stake for Kenya?
Yes.
If at all Harris wins or Trump wins, what does it mean for Kenya?
And there's actually so much for Kenya, really. They say this election is significant not only for the United States, but also as a political learning opportunity for nascent democracies such as Tanzania.
Right.
Definitely it is. Now, Fred, imagine this. Uko na kuku, unaona zinasafirishwa mahali. Kumbe, kuku hawa pia wanasafirisha madawa ya kulevya na maneno mengine.
Lo. That's how people get shocked in Kiswahili. Lo, la haula.
Tafakari hayo. Tafakari ya babu hayo.
Kuku watumika kusafirisha unga, gazeti la Mwananchi pale. Ni wakiwa hai. Sikia hii. Kete ndogo zatumika huku mmoja akiwa na uwezo wa kusafirisha gramu kati ya 200 na 300. Mamlaka dawa za kulevya yafunguka, wataalamu wa mifugo waonya. Lakini now people are getting really, really creative.
Yes.
You're using chicken to transport narcotics in Tanzania. You mean that business is that big in Tanzania? Hata Escobar ako amefikiria, ako amefika hapa.
I'm curious, what effect does it have to the now chicken? Sasa ukikuja kuikula baadaye, does it?
No, because what happens, just like human beings, if any of these tablets or capsules bursts inside the body, then it's death, it's certain death. So the chicken, if at all the capsules are evacuated safely, then the chicken will also be safe, but it will be traumatized. Because I don't know. It's traumatized chicken. But then again, do they have to slaughter the chicken for you to evacuate the capsules? So
no. For me, actually, it's the ingestion of it. Do they wanaziekea kama mahindi zinakula?
Meza tu.
How they?
Ama wewe unafikiria wanafanya namna gani? Let Tanzania. This is very interesting. Kwenye kurasa mbele pale. Where I come from, Kuku, we have a lot of respect for chicken, so we can do this.
Walijua sema Wamarekani kuamua ni Kamala Harris. Actually, nimeambiwa leo ni Kamala. Ni kumbe ni mahali anatumia ni Jamaica huko, lakini kumbe alitoka Bungoma. Ni Kamala Harris.
Kamala. All right. So at least they've given space to the US election there.
Yes.
Dada kaka kizimbani madai ya kugushi wosia wa mama yao. Also they try to alter the will of their departed mother. Na CCM yawatuliza walioenguliwa kura za maoni. Kura za maoni, ngojea kura yenyewe ya ukweli. Hapana kura ya maoni.
Ni mwezi huu, by the way. So even as USA is doing the whole polls today, Tanzania is also expected to do the civic polls. Even as they wait now for the general polls.
That comes sometime next year.
Yes.
All right.
Let's take a look at the weather in different parts. And today, because of the whole focus of USA, we narrowed it down to New York. Tuangalie. Wacha leo, inaangalia siku moja tu.
Leo utatuonyesha mambo.
Tuangalie weather in international places.
All right.
Yes. In New York, it's going to be, right now it's about 10 p.m. there. So, ini weather how right now is. So, usini usiku. Except tomorrow, which is now going to be there.
You can actually take a look at the election day, which starts at 8. Promises to be a very sunny day.
Yes. It's going to be, kutakuwa na mvua in most places in that state.
Highs of 23 is more or less like what Nairobi feels like. Yeah. So it's a beautiful day for elections.
Yes.
In New York, at least. Let's come back to
our own New York,
places closer to
Africa.
Us. Yes.
It is cloudy in the morning. It's going to remain like that up to.
Where is that now?
In Nairobi. This is in Nairobi. Up to 10 a.m. It's going to be cloudy, and then after that, it's going to get as high as 26. In the evening, they say expect some light showers as of 50%. Let's take a look at the precipitation. It's going to be 0.8 millimeters. They say, according to the weatherman, some reduced rainfall for this month. Another city in Kisumu now, 20 degrees Celsius right now. It's going to get as high as 27 in the course of the day. Do expect also some very light showers in the evening. So this might just be the norm in different parts of the country. Another city in Mombasa, 25 degrees. It's actually 50 days to Christmas, by the way.
Exactly 50 days to Christmas.
Love it.
Tunaenda sawa sawa.
So that means it's about, 60 days to New Year?
No, it's about 55 days.
Oh yeah, 55.
To the end of the year, only 55.
31st ndio ya muhimu, because hiyo ndio siku naenda kupiga nduru moja safi.
Ukiweza kupiga nduru.
In Mombasa, 31 degrees is the highest temperatures that you're going to be seeing today. Lowest ni 25. So wow, shanza some
wakulima huko Kitale.
Yes. Kule Kitale, they say rain likely around 1 p.m. And after that, so wakulima leo mko pazuri.
You know, I know some people are harvesting maize, and the problem is usually when you cut the maize stalks, you put them in a cone-like structure in the farm so that people can come and now start harvesting properly from there. Ikinyesha, there's nothing you can do on that farm. You have to wait until it dries. Yes, for you to come back to the farm. Na ikikaa sana hiyo mahindi inaharibika.
So wanafaa wafanye hivyo before 11.
By before 11, ikifika 11 hakuna mahindi kwa shamba.
Watu wa Kitale msiseme hatukuambia. after that. So prepare yourself with some heavy gear for all that. Taking a look at what is going to be happening today in our news diary. KCSE exams continue. The theory zilianza jana na chemistry as well as ilikuwa
English paper 2. Yes. English paper 1 and then chemistry paper 2.
Yes. Today we're going to be having maths paper 1 in the morning, and in the afternoon English comprehension paper.
That's a paper 2 for English.
Yes. So we're also going to be monitoring in different parts. As of yesterday, there's one student who passed away. There's also a number who did the KCSE exams while in hospital giving birth. So we're going to be just take a look at how these exams are going to be conducted. Also today, the United Arab Emirates government is going to be donating foodstuff to Red Cross. Now, this is going to be helping a number, about 50,000 households in different counties that are affected with the recent floods. They also going to be helping these households coming this October, November, December focus. So that is just a nutshell of what to expect in our news diary later on.
All right. Turejee nyumbani tuangazie magazeti in depth. All right. Back home, we take a look at the big stories on the front pages, and we start off with the Daily Nation. Of course, America Decides is a big story there. And at stake, democracy, a presidential election unlike any other in the United States history, entered its last full day yesterday with Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, and their campaigns scrambling to get supporters to the polls in a contest each portrays as an existential moment for America. If Trump, 78, wins, he would be the oldest person in U.S. history to be elected president, while Harris, 60, has a chance to become the very first woman to hold the world's most powerful job. So definitely, it is historic, whichever way it goes.
Yes.
So I was hoping they would go with the same angle, kama ile ya Uganda. What is at stake for Kenya?
Yeah.
At Tanzania, what is at stake for Tanzania? So hapa wanaongea tu hapana. The main story in the United States goes to the polls today in a neck-and-neck race between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. So they say, so tight is the race that both candidates stand an equal chance of occupying perhaps the most important leadership position in the world. So this one is not really that obvious. We cannot predict that kuna mmoja ati leading. No. It's neck and neck. So page 2.
Yes, on page 2, they go the headline, Trump or Harris, implications of U.S. elections for Africa. So they've generalized.
So it's not just Kenya, it's generally. Yes. And there's that question of LGBTQ. That
is popping up.
Yes, stance on LGBTQ rights. These are just some of the conversations that could mean or could change for Africa in case it goes one way or the other.
Yes. Something else they also make mention of, decisions on Ukraine-Russia war will have an effect on Africa as well.
All right. Back to the front page. Other quick highlights. Yesterday, Palechini, stick to your lane, Ruto tells judges. And this, he was addressing members of the Supreme Court and generally the Judiciary. Yesterday, as an apex court marked 12 years since its establishment. It's actually been 12 years since we got a Supreme Court.
Yeah.
It was established back in 2012. Yeah. 2 years after the promulgation of the Constitution. So we see the president there with his deputy walking, his deputy in tow. I'm telling you. So we have 2 presidents there, one of the
apex court and
Elidio Kotini. So that is the other big story. Quick highlights up on your front page, 6 billion shillings for COVID medics as counties rule out jobs. Ministry calls for rigorous enforcement of exam rules. And when it comes to crime, man's last call to wife and daughter hours before killings, and that is about the Eastleigh killings. Yeah. Pale nyuma, more university staff set tough conditions for its reopening. And this is a sad story. Unions WASU and KUSU maintain their stand on payment of salary, statutory deductions amounting to over 10 billion Kenyan shillings. You can convert into Ugandan money. Inaweza kuwa ni kama budget ya Kenya. All right, that's the Daily Nation today.
Let's take a look at another paper. Should be kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo. Wanauliza pale swali muhimu sana leo, Nani atatamba? Kwenye debe matokeo ya kura za Amerika, taifa lenye nguvu zaidi huathiri takriban nchi zote duniani kiuchumi, kisiasa, kivita na hata kitamaduni. Na hayo ni kweli kabisa. Sema Amerika kuandikisha historia leo kwa kumchagua rais wa kwanza wa kike au kumrejesha rais wa zamani. Kwingineko pale chini, masuala ya mahakama, Ruto, Kindiki na Koome wakutana. Pale kando, visa vituko KCSE ikianza rasmi nchini. Sema walimu waonywa kuhusu udanganyifu, watahiniwa kadhaa wakijifungua siku ya mtihani.
And it always happens. Exam tu ikianza hivi, people go into labor. Let's take a look at the Standard, and we're going to go a bit faster now. And the Standard, they only make a quick highlight on the US election there on the top strip. What's at stake as US goes to polls? That story is on page 28 of this paper. The big headline, they go with justice on trial. 12 years of the Supreme Court has been a mixed bag of different people. While some hail the apex court as the epitome of jurisprudence, others feel it has not met expectation. President William Ruto too has his word for the judges, whose word is final matters litigation. Lakini aliwaambia nini? Stick to your lane.
Yes, akasema we always talk about judicial independence and it is a fundamental principle of our constitution. But what happens when we have judicial overreach and interference?
And there we have a picture of the three people who have been or have occupied the office of Chief Justice since the apex court was established, and that is from left, the very first Chief Justice, William Mutunga, the second one on the right, David Maraga, and the third Chief Justice, the current one, Martha Koome. All right, so matters politics in service of country. Ruto plots for 2027 and has found a new narrative that sends a message of service for Kenya, not the villages and regions we come from. So that's a quick look, and they continue with the serialization of Bad Girl, Milli's book. On the back page, Liverpool be ready as old boy Alonso comes calling.
Is it top of the table?
It matters Champions League. On the back page, Champions League. That's the Standard today. Let's move on.
Kwenye gazeti la People Daily, the big headline is 20 hospitals where you're likely to die. Matters Health, it's an audit report that shows that while some government facilities stock expired medicines, others have no doctors to attend to patients. Is on page 4. This is even as, I think yesterday they also talk about the Social Health Authority and all the teething problems 1 month after its rollout. They continue with health matters. They also go with that pictorial of America Decides and the final campaigns that I believe were in Pennsylvania yesterday. Pennsylvania has been marked as one of those states that are is a very big decider. Yes.
All right.
Other conversations, something interesting that other dailies have not gone with that is very, very interesting. Parents, listen to this. 4 in every 10 adolescents aged between 10 and 17 are living with a mental health problem. That is, so chances are, is your child or your nephew, your niece also in this bracket. Ongelesha watoto wenu leo. Matters Sports, Dominican Republic discovers football after Under-17 World Cup. Spain won, not Spain, rather, North Korea beat Spain in the finals of this. But Kenyan's team, ilifurahia sana, wakasema, we've learned a lot. That is People Daily for you this morning.
Okay. Matters Business, IMF flags banks taking cheap CBK loans to invest in treasury bills. So 81 billion shillings tapped from discount window near to August, and then they see opportunity to make profits from low rate. So commercial banks have borrowed from the central bank emergency discount window to fund purchases of government securities, as they saw a profit opportunity from the facility's lower interest rate compared to treasury. But is that the purpose of this loans from CBK? The discount window is meant to be used to provide temporary liquidity to banks, but has now been used to fund the lenders' short-term investment activities. So kuna pale, kuna mchezo, kuna karata wanacheza pale. Kwingineko, KRA nets 10 billion shillings from crypto dealers. It's big news. Yeah? And yes, they also make mention of the happenings in the US. America decides in tight race between Harris and Trump.
And the ticker, the very interesting stories there. Apart from your...
Anasema IMF warns against budget cuts and backs new taxes. Taxes inakuja mutakipata shauri yenu. Kwingineko, private hospitals struggle to meet costs on SHA cash delays. Telcom wars deepen as 1 million more customers flee. Imagine that, 1 million customers fleeing. And bank chiefs face stiffer fines for breaches. That's the Business Daily. Tumalizie na The Star, tuangalie Karakacha.
200 bunge staff with fake papers sent home. So chances are someone who might have served you and given you services in parliament might just have had fake papers. It's a cheating culture. Possibly many more cheats will be sniffed out in ongoing crackdown. And this exercise was ordered by the Public Service Commission over a year ago and has nailed both senior and junior employees. They've posted some photos
of the
here.
Suspects there.
Forgery suspects. Francis Mfundi, certificate from the Kenya School of Government on Leadership Development and Program. Edna Bitange, Brenda Sulungai, and Mark Sandui. They have all denied the charges. Some other conversations. Pale chini, Roba evades death row to serve 10 years instead. But it matters politics as well. They say fresh excitement around Kenyatta in Judicial for 2027.
All right.
Yes.
So that's The Star. Remember, today being Tuesday, it is a free copy of The Star and also comes with a MyGov pullout inside. So for government tenders and job opportunities, see the MyGov pullout inside The Star. Remember, smart people
Read The Star.
read The Star. All right, tuangazie Karakacha sasa tukimalizia hii news review.
On the cartoons, we start off with the People Daily. Arguably my best today because the commentator is asking questions that we are all asking as Kenyans. And they have caricatures of President William Ruto as well as Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Deputy President. He's about 4 days old. Yes. And they're all, okay, the President is carrying the campaign promises. Yeye ameshikilia tu hapo na vidole mbili anamsaidia. And the commentator is asking, now that you have Kindiki, are you going to use Gachagua as an excuse for failing to deliver your campaign promises?
Ni swali tu pale.
Ni sisi ndio tumeuliza.
Sisi ni cartoonist anaitwa Stano. Lakini si Nyaringita, ni Stano. People Daily. Aha, this is a standard and it goes with 12 years a slave. We talk about the Supreme Court marking 12 years yesterday since it was established. But has it been that independent? That's the question. Because there's a hand that appears to be holding this representation of the court, holding a gavel. So 12 years a slave.
What arm of the government is this?
It's an arm of government. This is definitely an arm of government.
The question is, which arm of government is it?
At least the Daily Nation talks about matters the US election and now they've described Africa there with a begging bowl, and that's the worst description we can see of Africa, of our continent. So yes, we're looking at elections in the US, but whichever way it goes,
we're still begging.
Yes, our hands are stretched out to the begging bowl. Ule mwenye atakuja tusaidie tu na pesa.
No. Because it should be a two-way traffic, not a one-way traffic.
Hii aigabana.
Hapo umechoma.
Anyway. Hatuna ya Star pale, but the Star cartoon today has the former deputy president. Na kwa pickup, alisema mizigo yake inaweza toshea kwa pickup moja. Pale State House ameenda kubeba mitego yote ile alikuwa ameweka hapo, so there's so many mouse traps that is loaded onto the pickup and is driving away. So the Star still stuck with the former deputy president.
It's actually going to be a big day for him today as the courts listen to his case and continue that whole case.
Remember, the case still continues. Yes. Even with the swearing in of the new deputy president, the cases with the former deputy president challenging his impeachment still continue before the judges. Now, we'll be looking at these headlines and a lot more after the break with my panelists. I'd introduced them earlier on. Let me just go through the names again. Joe Mutambu, former MP Mwingi Central, Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy expert, Gigi Kagombe, MP Gatundu South, and James Gakuya, MP Embakasi North. So do stand by for this and a lot of the conversations after the break. Yes,
after the break, property ownership, that is around 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Property ownership during marriage. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. A quick outlook of the traffic. Angalie pahali being about some days to Christmas. Watu washaanza kupanga.
50 days to Christmas, there's a lot of travel, holiday travel. Watu wanafunga shule wengine. Some but kawaida tu traffic.
Watu wa kwenu wanaenda nyumbani.
So now you see you have to wait mpaka ndio ukibeba unabeba sofa set na mattress. Usitume watoto na mattress na ubaki Nairobi bila. Jogoo Road is building up slowly around areas Makadara, same trouble spots, City Stadium roundabout, Landis Road getting into town, Haile Selassie, Pale Mudhurwa, Machakos bus station, it's building up. Apo, there's a lot of travel around this area.
Yes.
So that's to be expected. Pale Easy Coach Pia along Haile Selassie Avenue, it's to be expected.
Mombasa Road.
Southern part of the city, Mombasa Road, Nakatu, Sawasawa, Southern Bypass not looking bad, Langata Road 2, Mbagathi Way, unajua it's already holiday, watu waendi kazi mapema.
Yes. Hakuna school buses.
Shule zishafunga, alafu Wayaki Way too, looking good. I think it's only Thika Road, kama kawaida pale Pangani Interchange, they need to get a solution for this. Lazima ukuje usimame hapa 15 minutes. Ndio ufunguliwe gate ya kuingia town. That's the traffic situation in Nairobi this morning.
Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a few. Weka remote hapo chini, usiende mbali. Hotter than your coffee.
I tell you.
Hata tafuta coffee yako. Don't go too far.
Vile unavyojua watoto wengi sana hawana namna. Mimi ningependelea watoto wasome.
I'm here to stress on education. At the same time, let us actually do any kind of sport that we are doing. Sport speaks the best language to everybody.
Tunataka tutafute talents. Zile raw talents kutoka kule nyumbani mashinani mahali tuko leo.
Hizi mbio za Chepsaita, like all other sports, zinaleta watu pamoja.
We want to use this event to uplift the lives of the community.
Anafurahia hii mchezo sana. Hata sikaange naambianga watu tuende Chepsaita.
Wanafunzi wakimbie ili wakuze talanta ya mbio ama kuhimiza tena elimu.
This is the place to be. Hapa ndipo mahali wanastahili kuwa tarehe 7. Wale watoto walikimbia last year, wamekimbia mpaka wamefuka mipaka zetu za Kenya.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwe watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
All right, welcome back. You're watching TV47. This is the Morning Cafe, State of the Nation, where we take a look at the big headlines. My name is Freddy Ndimuli. Of course, today the big headline on most of the dailies, even locally, has to do with the US elections. Historic polls, that's a big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. On the front page of Taifa Leo, wanauliza swali, nani atatamba? It is exactly 10:38 p.m. 4th of November in Washington, D.C., the seat of government of the United States, meaning they're still on 4th of November. Sisi tushafika election day, lakini election ni yao. So they will be going to the polls in the next 7 to 8 hours or so. It is an election, but a lot of Africans are watching keenly to see which way it goes, because this will definitely have implications on Africa and individual African countries, including Kenya as well. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning. Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy expert. Karibu sana TV47.
Fred, karibu. Asante sana. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Next to Bwana Ahmed Hashi, we have James Gakuya, familiar face on this panel, MP Embakasi North. Bwana Gakuya, karibu sana.
Thank you.
Let's start from that point, the US election. And you look at the dailies in the region. Uganda has talked, in fact, the front page of the Daily Monitor is purely about what this election means for Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. The same question was being asked on the front page of the Citizen in Tanzania. What does this US election mean to Tanzania? In Kenya, we talk about probably just how exciting the election is, but definitely even Kenyans would want to know, what does this election mean to Kenya? Yes, it's occupying the front pages of Taifa Leo and the biggest daily we have, Daily Nation. Bwana Hashi, let's start from there.
Well, I think that every country on earth, including China, which is as powerful as the United States, is watching this election very keenly, because the United States has tremendous impact on the global political economy. That's the nexus of how economics and politics interchange with each other. Now, you know that there are wars in Europe, there's wars in the Middle East. Just yesterday, you saw that the director of the CIA and some other senior military intelligence officers came to see President Ruto. That is a sign that there is a qualitative difference between the relationships we as Africans have and what Europe and say China have with the United States. The United States sees us at the very bottom of their political and economic agenda because we are unable to see the wisdom of them being called the United States. So we are unable to bring together even East Africa to create a common market for ourselves with about 250 million people so that we can do trade, reduce the boundaries, have a common currency and end this nonsense of living in countries of 30 million and 40 million. So I think that currently the United States is a hegemon. It is a superpower. Its economy is about $30 trillion US, and that's just the formal GDP. What the United States has influences is that it's the world's policeman. And one of the major issues that are being discussed in the election debate, which is going to influence the United States election, is the genocide that's going on in Gaza. And I call it a genocide because it's one. And every human being, whatever your religious faith, and you can see what's happening there and how the United States is just unjustifiably supporting one of the contenders for power over there, particularly Israel. There is no cry about Ukraine. You know, when they speak about the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, it's a one-way street discussion. But the one on Ukraine is a completely different one. You remember in Ukraine, they were chasing us Africans out of Poland into railways. They were not allowing us to leave the conflict zone. So you know that one of the candidates here, Mr. Trump, has called us a word that I cannot use on TV. It would be irresponsible for me to use that kind of word.
Are you worried that if Trump comes back, that kind of sentiment from a Republican president would change the fortunes for Africa?
I think Africans will only change their fortunes when they do things for themselves. And to end this kind of dependence on Americans and Europeans, it puts us square in the middle of something called neocolonialism. We in Kenya kicked out the colonials after they oppressed us. And after we kicked them out, we did not divide up the shambas or even make one big shamba so that we could get a huge corporation to produce pineapples. We gave it to Del Monte, which comes from another country. So our political class in this country, kowtows to the American state and American power. We don't have a vision to try and kill unemployment, create manufacturing base, and create a regional economy that's going to give kids jobs. And I think Donald Trump is going to win the election. He's going to beat Kamala Harris. That's my opinion. And very small amount of people think that. I'm one of them. I think the reason why they're going to he's going to win is that the Americans are not ready to elect a biracial black Indian woman as president. I don't think they're ready.
They say the same thing about Barack Obama, that yes, they were not ready to elect a black man president.
Yes, I agree. Everybody was shocked. But the thing was that Barack Obama is an establishment fellow.
Okay.
He was clearly a man of the party, and he came for 2 terms, and he was elected in landslides because he was produced by the system. Okay. Kamala is also, I'm just going to end, Kamala is also is a person from the system. But unless white, college-educated women come out in force to help her win, I don't think she'll win.
Right. Bwana Gakuya, we've seen the kind of relationship this current Kenyan administration has had with the U.S. Only a few months ago, President William Ruto was hosted for an official state visit at the White House. And we've seen the kind of cordial relationships between the president and even the ambassador to Kenya from the U.S., Meg Whitman. This could change if, according to Bwana Hash's prediction, Trump takes over. Do you think that it would really mean a lot for Kenyans if Trump takes over? Would it mean a whole lot of difference for us?
Thank you, Adimuri. Allow me to salute the viewers wherever they are watching us from. And coming to the American election down and expectation from our end. Let me say that as much as American politics matters, I want to concur with my panelists that American, in terms of economic stability, they are much ahead of anybody else, controlling about $28 trillion dollars economy against China's 18 trillion dollars economy, GDP. But the biggest battle here is that I was listening to both Harris and Trump when they were busy in their campaign. They were making promises of how to deal with Russia and Ukraine. But when you come to areas like Palestine and Israel, both of them were concurring that they are in support for Israel. Then when you come to matters Africa, none of them was committal. And in this case, it tells you that America is treating us as second fiddle. It is true that by the close of the end of the current president, there was an invitation of our incumbent president in America, who was promised many goodies. I'm not sure whether either of those goodies has seen the light of the day, but we wait to see. My concern is that as a country, there is one window, which I expect that, in fact, this is the most important window, which is trade. And this is, currently we have AGOA, which is anchoring us in America in what we call free trade and quota-free trade. If this window, because the window is coming to an end next year, if this window is not going to be extended, then that's a big blow to Africa. Now, taking concern that as Kenyans, we have seen that window taking part in our big scope of EPZ, which does textile industries, apparel industries, and also minerals that are exported through that particular route. We have not exhausted that particular window because we have been at the average of 11%. But I guess that, in fact, if we become more vibrant, we can extend that window to 20 or 30, if possible, because it is open. The other thing is that there was a current discussion between Kenya and America, which was a STIP, a strategic trade investment partnership. It was almost at the tail end for approval. The change of the change of the guards now may affect that particular window of that STIP negotiation. Maybe we can lose a lot if that particular window is not going to be given any room by any of the income. I am sure that, in fact, if Harris comes in, she will consider that. But I am not sure whether Trump will consider that. Okay. And the other thing is that as much as matters Africa is concerned, as a country, let me say we have these current issues to do with Haiti. We don't know whether the regime that is coming in will also give it in a single room. And probably that's a matter that we don't know how it will vary. It's a matter just to wait and see whoever will come in, whether he will consider that. I am sure that if Harris comes in, because you just inherit from his boss, then she can move on with whatever program was there. But in case Trump comes in, he may drastically decide to overturn this kind of programs. So it is 50-50.
Yes.
I don't know how it will vary, and let us expect that, in fact, because here today the ball is with Americans to decide. And as much as we expect the results, the game is too tight. That the election seems to be neck and neck.
Yes.
Either way. But we hope that, in fact, if Harris could win, maybe our concerns could be given a room.
Yet the pundits argue that Republican foreign policy, especially when it comes to Africa, has been a bit friendlier. During George W. Bush's Jr.'s time, there was the PEPFAR, the Presidential Fund for AIDS. And once the Republican came in, the Democrat came in after that, that fund really dwindled. And yes, now we're beyond the AIDS funding phase, but that could signal a lot that maybe general sentiment in Kenya is that people prefer a Democratic president in the US, probably because of Obama. But there are others who argue that Republicans could actually be friendlier to the African nation.
Well, someone once said that it is dangerous to be America's foe, but it is fatal to be America's friend. And countries like Iraq and a lot of countries around the world have felt the wrath of the Americans. I think the way you pose the question itself betrays the entire mentality of how us Africans want to deal with these superpowers and how we should deal with ourselves. I'll give you 3 examples. President Ruto was wined and dined at the White House. When he came back, there was massive demonstrations that nearly toppled the government. President accused the Americans of aiding and abetting these demonstrations. It's the same guy who went to the Oval Office. You know, the American ambassador here interferes directly with the internal politics of our country. And this kind of remains of the day shows you the dependence we have economically, where we keep asking for funds for this or that, where we should be able to internally create our own situation in which we get our own funds so we can get some independence. Nobody is saying that you should not have a relationship with the United States, no question about it. But what kind of relationship should we have with it? Of course, they're a superpower, the biggest, strongest state that's ever existed in history, is the Americans. So I put it to you, Fred, that it's very important that our national and our regional consciousness begins to understand that we need to start doing things for ourselves. And I think that that will give us some self-respect, and others will respect us. You saw the CIA director when he came to see President Ruto. He had his hand in his pocket. The CIA director should know that in African culture, or in any culture around the world, that's just the most disrespectful thing anybody can do to any other person. It just shows you what he thinks of the relationship we have with Kenya. When Mr. Ichung'wah put his hand in the pocket at the airport, the president pointedly said, "Take your hand out of your pants." It shows you the double standards of politics in our country, and particularly with our president. Because they think that the Americans came here for a military basis, one here in Wajir and one in Turkana, because they are now afraid about what is going to happen in Ethiopia. They are afraid about the spillover from the destruction of the Sudanese state and the turmoil in South Sudan. And Kenya is a right-wing ally of the United States and Great Britain. And the reason it is like that is because the economy of our country is owned by, at least half this economy is owned by the Americans and the British, which is a disastrous situation for our economy because, of course, we don't own even a shop in the United States. So I put it to you, it's very important for us not to dilly-dally about what the real relations the real relations that we have with the powers that be in this world, and understand how we can try and transform our own economies to self-sufficiency, so that the next time a CIA director comes to the State House, he doesn't put his hand in his pocket to say hello to our president.
And talking about culture, there are some serious cultural discussions around Africa's relationship with the United States. And Uganda, our neighbors, probably have suffered quite a bit when it comes to that. The issue of the LGBTQ rights and the kind of laws enacted locally. Now, between a democratic, more liberal America administration and a more conservative Republican president, probably when the discussion is about cultural, Africans should probably value a more conservative America, and probably that should be the discussion.
In the more, let me say, in the matters of issues to do with the culture, it is true that to adopt the matters to do with same gender sex to Africanism to us is is totally a bad omen. And therefore, I don't think there is any African country that's up to support that particular agenda.
Well done.
And whether that agenda will be pushed by force or not, anyway, our courts sometimes pronounce themselves that that particular religion or that particular kind of setup has their fundamental rights, their human rights. Of course, yes. But naturally, you feel that, in fact, it is a bad omen for such a marriage of a same-gender parties. And I can tell you, that one is a score from the conservative, because they don't hammer that, but the Democratic does. But you see, what you value at the end is this pushed by force, or is it by choice? Then if it's by choice, then there's no problem. But if it's by force, that's when it can be seen as a problem.
And that conversation could also extend from that LGBTQ issue to also issues of pro-choice, abortion, and women's rights as well, reproductive rights. That is also a big conversation there. And we adopt a lot of culture from the US as well.
One, let me say that, in fact, there is various number of American culture that Africans can fit. And what I would think is that we should give a room for Africans to choose what they can adopt from America and what they cannot. Okay. And that particular borderline should be not by any means be any force to enter to that. Okay. I think that as much as the democracies are concerned, it is important for them to recognize that African democracies also need to respect their beliefs, their faiths, and also their culture, which should not be seen at any point as a sword to force them to get into that particular route.
Okay. 60 seconds, anything to add to that?
Well, you know, that's cultural imperialism. We have our values. We are governed by the rule of the Bible and the Quran here. The Constitution is not bigger than our faiths. I think this nonsense will not allow it here at all. They could go and do it on the...
More conservative America, more liberal America, the administration...
We are conservative, you know, I'm socially conservative, and I'm politically a social democrat. So you can't pin down people to have certain particular ideology. People are now sophisticated enough to choose between one set of values and a set of ideas. And I think that in the United States, what is happening is a decline. I actually think that some of the politics in the United States is actually Africanized, if I can use that word, because some of these dependent neo-colonial countries around here in our region or in the rest of Africa, if you look at the politicians and how they speak, Donald Trump is no different from them. Donald Trump is not different at all from them. And but it's very interesting that Africans in the United States, Africans, people from here on this continent, and African nations, they don't say it loudly, but they're sympathetic to Donald Trump because Donald Trump is a social conservative. And so I think they think it's refreshing because he speaks bluntly about our continent. He tells us who we are. The Democrats...
whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not, the Democrats send their CIA director, as I've said here, with his hand in his pocket to meet our president. You know, that tells you the kind of stiff upper nose arrogance that these fellows have about us. So no matter what happens, what is important is we need to think about how we're going to grow our economy in this region and be self-dependent and not go, as your cartoon was saying, with a begging bowl to the United States for aid.
Yes. Yes, the cartoon on the Daily Nation today has Africa depicted there with a begging bowl, looking at the U.S. elections. Whichever way it goes, Africa is still there begging. It is a minute past 11 p.m., November 4th in Washington, D.C. So they're still in yesterday. Meanwhile, we are already on election day. It is the election, but we're already on 5th. So they go to the polls in about 8 hours or so to elect their 47th president. Will it be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Today is a big day. Right here, Morning Cafe, we take a break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Something that's on the front page of the Standard, justice on trial. The Supreme Court of Kenya, the apex court, has marked 12 years. In one of the cartoons I saw, it's 12 years a slave. That's a depiction by a cartoonist. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll be right back after this.
Vile unavyojua watoto wengi sana hawana namna. Mimi ningependelea watoto wasome.
I'm here to stress on education. At the same time, let us actually do any kind of sport that we are doing. Sport speaks the best language to everybody.
Tunataka tutafute talents. Zile raw talents kutoka kule nyumbani mashinani mahali tuko leo.
Hizi mbio za Chepsaita, like all other sports, zinaleta watu pamoja.
We want to use this event to uplift the lives of the community.
Anafurahia hii mchezo sana. Hata sikaange naambianga watu tuende Chepsaita.
Wanafunzi wakimbie ili wakuze talanta ya mbio ama kuhimiza tena elimu.
This is the place to be. Hapa ndipo mahali wanastahili kuwa tarehe 7. Wale watoto walikimbia last year, wamekimbia mpaka wamefuka mipaka zetu za Kenya.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Morning Cafe on TV47. My name is Fred Indimuli. We continue the state of the nation. Just before the break, we focused on the US elections and what is at stake for Kenya and for Africa. That conversation will still continue. It is exactly 6 hours, 52 minutes before the polls open in the US for them to elect their 47th president.
I was saying something before you...
Yes.
So let me just take 10 more seconds.
Okay.
Then I'll give it to my
so that I can also introduce the other panelists as well.
The Americans vote with their pocketbooks. They don't vote for foreign policy. They don't vote for any other issue except was their lives better economically from the last president to this president.
Okay.
So the Democrats haven't done a great job in the economy. And I think inflation has gone up in the United States. I believe it has. And what's going to happen is that when Trump was in charge, the economy grew and people had money in their pockets. So when they go to the ballot box, they're not going to think specifically, the overwhelming majority, about what's happening in Israel, Palestine, or what's happening in Ukraine. They're going to think of jobs, jobs, jobs.
All right. Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy expert, one of our panelists this morning. Allow me to introduce the new members of the panel. Joe Mutambu, former MP Mwingi Central, karibu sana. You missed a huge chunk of our conversation this morning, but I'll give you an opportunity to say something. Also, Gigi Kagombe, MP Gatundu South, karibu sana, good morning. So let's start with you, Bwana Mutambu. We were just looking at what's at stake for Kenya. Because if you look at the dailies in the region, everyone is asking, what's at stake for Uganda in these elections? What's at stake for Tanzania? The question is also the same here. What is at stake for Kenya with these elections in the US?
Apologies for coming late. I live in a different world, and our roads sometimes they are not fair. The American election versus or what we stand to gain as a country. Save of the bilateral arrangements, we need to ask ourselves, what is it that we do with Americans as Kenyans? Or what is it that Americans do with Kenya? And who stand to benefit more among the two countries? And in my opinion, Americans benefit more from Kenya because we offer them some facilities to do their things, and that's why they want to settle in Kenya when it comes to matters of security. And we also benefit from their intelligence. And my opinion is that either Kamala or Trump for Kenya is all the same because their interest is one, and they will maintain that. They'll maintain their interest first, and we benefit from their interest. In terms of trade, we need to ask ourselves, what is it we trade with Americans? And by far-reaching, if Kamala wins, what will he do with the Middle East? Or if Trump wins, what will he do with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East? So those are the questions we're asking ourselves. And if the problem in the Middle East is solved, is it good for Kenya? And the answer is yes, because most of goods we get from Ukraine. And when the Ukraine is fighting, what do we stand to benefit as Kenya? So there are some other spiral effects apart from what you get directly from America. So the win of each of the candidate will of course have some impact into Kenyan economy. And that's what is our interest. But our interest is not, we are not biased to any. We can only be biased to what will happen to our country if either of the candidate wins.
Bwana Kagombe, if you look at the cartoon on the Daily Nation today, it has Africa portrayed as a poor guy. Just looking at the US election, it's on page 15 of the Daily Nation. But there's a hand stretched out with a begging bowl. And I was saying that just how sad that depiction is in a caricature this morning. That whichever way it goes, the only relationship we have with the US is that of what they can give us directly. Do you agree with that depiction? And do you think that can change at this time?
Well, I think it shouldn't be that way, but the reality is that we are a lot dependent on so many other countries. As we're having a conversation here, behind the scenes, we're saying we have a lot of reliance. We import a lot of grains as Africa. I mean, we have, and I've said it before here, that we have become a completely import country. And, you know, I told you last year, we spent about 22 trillion importing stuff. We are running a negative deficit. We are running a deficit of trade, close to about 11 trillion Kenya shillings. So, and that is the case in the entire of Africa. So what I would say is that, as my friend said here, that the Democrats and Americans, a lot of times when Americans are voting, they're voting with their economy in mind, not about foreign policy and all those other things. But their foreign policy will, of course, come to play. And the geopolitics, depending on whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win. If the Republicans win, then you would expect that there will be a lot of interference with the war between Ukraine and Russia. Probably is going to stop. The Republicans are unlikely to go to war with any other person, and they are likely to concentrate on manufacturing and getting back their jobs to come back from the East and come back to America. But on the other hand, then if Kamala Harris wins, then she would understand Africa better. She has, her foreign policy would be in a way that would be favorable to Africa. But those are realities that we face. I mean, I was having another conversation between a local company that buys tea from a local producers, and we are affected by the dollar. Those are the realities of life. That a company is in Kericho buying tea in Kericho, but they're affected by the dollar because the dollar sets the market. Yeah. The market is set in Mombasa, and it is dollar based. So we must accept that we are actually reliant on these big economies. But that is not how it should be. We should work towards ensuring that as Africa, because we have enough population to trade amongst ourselves, that we can actually produce and trade amongst ourselves and create an economy that is based, that is not necessarily dollarized and is not dollar based.
I'll ask you one more question, because one of the biggest debates in this election has been about immigration. And we have many of our own people who always aspire to move to America. And we hear the sentiments from Donald Trump and his stand on immigration. Do you expect this to change that drastically?
It won't change that drastically. But before I even comment on that, you know, why do our people want to move out of this country? Why do our people want to move out of this continent? Why are we not happy at home? Why are we happy when we're visiting other places? We must accept that these economies were built by people. And we must be willing to build our own economies. And you know, forget politics and everything. We must get to a point where we talk to each other and agree that we're going to fix our own country. And there must be a price that is going to be paid. And we must get to a point where we say, if you are a politician, if you're a leader and you're not taking us in the direction that we want, then we want you out, and we want people who can make these economies work. Because what don't we have? I mean, we live in the tropics. We are blessed. We have proper resources amongst us. We have, you know, arable land that can feed us. I mean, go to Uganda here. I mean, we have what it takes to feed our population and educate our population. But I think we have a long way to go, because I think one of the greatest things that has been affecting us and why people have wanted to move is our education system. Because it's as if we're educated to, you know, to go and find an economy that works and just get employed, and we've not been taught for the market that we live in.
All right.
So we train for other economies, and I think we need to change our education system so that, I mean, you would imagine Americans wondering whether they can come to Kenya or not. I mean, it's not a story they will be thinking. They're okay at home. So we need to get to that place also.
All right. Yes, matters immigration, definitely a big debate in the U.S. on this election. 6 hours, 43 minutes to go before the polls open in the U.S. for them to elect the 47th president of the United States. We'll leave it there for now. Come back home and focus a bit more on matters that are closer to us, and we wait to see how the Americans will choose the way forward. On the front page of the Standard, justice on trial. 12 years of the Supreme Court has been a mixed bag of different people. While some hail the apex court as the epitome of jurisprudence, others feel it has not met expectation. President William Ruto, too, has his word for the judges, whose word is final on matters litigation. Bonagakuya, if I may just quote the president, he said, he's quoted here on the front page of the Daily Nation, "Stick to your lane," he tells judges. In the inside story, it's even more interesting because it says that the courts should respect manifesto-driven agenda. Yes, it says, he urged the judiciary to exercise restraint, arguing that judicial actions should support the country's shift towards issue-based politics rather than ethnic or personality-driven agendas. The judiciary must consider the place of manifesto-driven governance that citizens vote for. Bonagakuya, that is a very telling statement because the courts basically deal with legality of matters or lack thereof. It cannot be about simply because a manifesto has been drafted this way or this is a hope I have for this country. Do you agree with this statement by the president that the judiciary needs to stick to its lane? Do you think they had strayed from their lane at any point?
In the morning, let us agree that, in fact, the diviners of the constitutions, of our constitution, thought about it on a very broad way. And by the time they arrived to create 3 arms of the government, there was a need for that. Remember that this country has been on a line of an imperial president who was a pure dictator and who, whatever decides to be done is what was to be done. And that's the reason why Kenya decided that it should move out of that constitution and migrate to more progressive constitution. And the point in time we are in, let me say we have this Supreme Court, which have served now 12 years. And I can tell you very authoritatively that the first Chief Justice made a very progress of this constitution, and also Maraga did it. And standing firm to protect the constitution, I think is one of the mandates that judiciary should stand for. Constitution can be misused by politicians. Where can Kenyans seek for refuge? If the judiciary is going to buy fear from politically, it is a suicidal. If the judiciary at any single point will lie low and try to suit the interests of the government or the state because of pressure, it can be not, because let us agree that where is the supreme, where is the sovereignty? The sovereignty stands with the people. The people are the owners of judiciary. The people are the owners of the parliament. The people are the owners of executive. They only delegate power, and they can grab that power and own it direct. That is what our constitution states. And therefore, no single, including the head of state, can force the judiciary the way to go. Their route is well defined by the constitution. Any other roadside instructions is overtaken by that. I would state very clearly that judiciary should stand firm, protect the constitution, and protect the people of Kenya and their properties. And that is what they are supposed to. Let me tell you, Idumuri, do you want to tell us that today is when we are arriving to think that the judiciary is taking the state on a different route. The manifestos of political parties are there. But if the manifestos are not following the constitutional path, then they should be declared unconstitutional.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Okay.
That should be the position.
Bonahashi, the headline on page 7 of the Standard reads, courts should keep off politics and state programs, quoting the president. That would suggest that politics should not be subject to the judiciary. That is off by any standard, Bonahashi.
Well, in my view, the president is an autocrat. The president doesn't want anyone to interfere with his presiding over our country. He doesn't want any challenge. He wants everything that he says done. He's already captured the National Assembly. You saw the speed with which Mr. Gachagua was thrown out of office. This is just facts on the table where the people of this country can see. And now he's telling the judiciary that if you interfere with my directives, I'm going to do something about it. And I think that the president also should not lie to this country by saying that the manifestos that people elected him on should be followed. The president hasn't followed on his manifesto. The UDA has collapsed. He's betrayed the people from the mountain who elected him. The economy is in shambles. The judiciary and the president are virtually at war. The National Assembly is the most cowardly National Assembly since the independence of Kenya. Just ticking whatever the president was saying they should do. Kenyans are angry at their National Assembly. They're angry at their president. They're angry at their judiciary. They're angry across the board with their government. And I think that the Gen Zs who nearly overthrew the government of this country must, if anybody remembers what happened the other day, I think it's very important for public intellectuals to tell the people of this country the truth, the way it is, unvarnished. Because all our lives depend on our country to be stable, to have the rule of law, to have a separation of powers, and to have an economy that's working. None of those things are happening. The president came in on an agenda of transformation. There is no transformation. What is transforming is we're coming from mega corruption to imperial corruption. President lied to the people and he said that we're not going to bring ule mtu wa kitandawili into government. Today, Mr. Odinga is prime minister, de facto prime minister in this country. The government cannot move without going to his office up there in Upper Hill. So I'd like the president to give this country a break. Just give us a break. We are waiting for the elections to come so that we can exercise our franchise and just sweep these political leaders out and throw them into the dustbin of history.
Okay. Bwana Mutambu, the suggestion here by the president is that probably the issues we're facing now could be as a direct result of some of the legal challenges that some of the government policies have encountered in the corridors of justice. Do you agree with that? And do you think that he's right to accuse the judiciary? Probably the work would have been done better by another arm of government.
As a Kenyan, I am very disappointed. And I always get disappointed when I hear some statement coming from my president. I'm saying my president because I honor him in two things. One, I voted for him. Two, he is the president of the Republic of Kenya, and I'm a Kenyan. So I have all rights to call him my president, whether I agree or disagree with him. And I wonder whether there is anybody around him who checks what he says. For a statement like this to come from a president whom I believe he has some lawyers as advisors and telling judges to stick, or judiciary to stick to their line. It is very true. Whatever judiciary is doing is sticking to its line of maintaining and interpreting our constitution. And if executive does anything contrary to the constitution, whether the president likes it, whether Mutambo likes it, judiciary will interpret it rightly, and they will tell whoever who has gone against the constitution, whatever you are doing is unconstitutional. So what the president tells the judiciary not to interfere with any or other arms of government or other institutions. That means institution will wake up today, do whatever they want, constitutionally or unconstitutionally, and because there is a caution from the president, the judiciary should stay away. Who will suffer in this case? It is Kenyans. So this is a statement which is uncalled for. If I was a president, I would not make this statement. Okay, I would find another, I'll craft another language, but not to tell them stick to your lane. Imagine, remember, this is the same judiciary. When somebody felt that the election was not done fairly, and they went to the same judiciary, and the judiciary stuck to their line, and they said William Ruto won. All right? So, if you enjoyed that pronouncement, or if you enjoyed the outcome of the court when it was favoring you, you should also enjoy when they come and tell you, you know what, Mr. President, this law which has been passed by Parliament is unconstitutional and it cannot serve Kenyans.
Okay.
The same thing you should also appreciate when they come and tell you what you are doing or what executive is doing is wrong. They are not interfering. They are telling you what, or they are interpreting constitution for you and what Kenyans, not even what Kenyans are feeling, because I may feel something which is also against the constitution. But they are saying it as it is, as per the document, as per our Bible, which is a constitution. So, you know, you may go to a mosque and you are Christian. Whatever is being preached there, you feel is not, it's not in line with how your beliefs, all right? But in matters of law, it is not what you believe as a person. It is what the law says. And this is where my president missed when he uttered these words.
Okay. The story further quotes the president saying the courts must weigh decisions with public interest in mind. How do we strike a balance between public interest and populism? That could suggest that probably even the courts could be playing to the gallery sometimes. Do you agree with that? That probably the judiciary and some of the criticism directed to them is warranted? Bwana Kagombe.
You know, Fred, the framers of our constitution did not envisage a situation where any of the three arms of government is going to do the work of the other. And the three arms of government are very important as constituted because they keep watch on each other, because everybody, even the people who are appointed judges, are Kenyans. And if you're saying that when you're elected a member of parliament, then you become corrupt, then it tells to our core, it talks to us, we as a people. It's not parliament that corrupts you, it's our society that corrupts you. If we find that people are corrupt, if the president is corrupt, if the political class is corrupt, then it tells you that it talks to our core, because those people are elected by our society. So two things. One, President Ruto's first action as a president was to appoint the judges. You remember that on the day he was sworn in. And his work, and he said, and he talked about the judiciary very, very, very prominently. And he said he wants them to have the independence. The police service. We even removed the reliance of police service from executive. That is why they now run their own vote. Because the government of Kenya Kwanza envisaged a situation where everybody is going to do their work. But two things. If our law and our jurisprudence is dependent on what we make as a legislature in both the houses of the National Assembly, or the National Assembly and Senate, both houses of parliament, and also jurisprudence is filled and is given meat by court, like what we saw in the recent past. You know, things that the Constitution has not addressed very, very eloquently, and things that legislature has not done further legislation upon, and the courts made the decision. Before the swearing in of the deputy president, we had been in court. The president was stopped by a court in Kirinyaga and said, okay, fine, we have a court, let it be canvassed in court. And the issues were canvassed, and he agreed. It's the same thing, that if the executive overreach try to overreach or overreaches to the judiciary, it is wrong. It is the same thing if judiciary overreaches to the executive or legislature.
Do you agree that is the case right now, that there's judicial overreach?
We have had judicial overreach. We must be honest enough, because if you're here to whip emotions of Kenyans and tell them the way this government is bad and the way things are very bad, and then should just wrap up this country and then go. But if you're here to speak the truth and debate without emotions, there has been judicial overreach. In many instances.
Yes.
For example, you remember, for example, we have been talking about CDF Act, all right? An act that has been passed with public participation. We have been to radio stations, we've been to a lot of places and called people and talked to the people during public participation and asked them, is this something that you want? And then every time it is put in place, then the courts overturn it, all right? That is complete judicial overreach. If you have seen cases in this country where people are now used to getting what we call anticipatory bail, something that is completely can't be backed by our laws, that there's suspicion, that you have committed this, the suspicion that you've committed this crime, and we have arms delegated or given the power by the Constitution to do those work, then the courts decide, no, you're not going to do that. You will not talk to that person. We've stopped you. We have had so many instances, and our courts are also wide. Courts are everywhere, and not. Most of the times what comes to us is what the Supreme Court does or what the High Court in Nairobi does. But we have many other instances of judicial overreach. And I say that with a lot of humility, because we all depend on the courts. And a lot of human rights especially have been protected by our courts. So we have had very good sides of the court, but we have some elements, and we must be honest enough to say it.
Yet there's definitely a platform to address seek redress when you find that probably there's judicial overreach, the JSC. How come these complaints are not directed that way? Wanagakuya, do you agree with your colleague in the National Assembly that in some instances there's been judicial overreach, and therefore some of this criticism coming even from the president himself is warranted to the courts?
Let us agree that the mandate of the courts is purely to interpret the law. And there's no way you can force them to interpret the law to your side. And if they must interpret the law to favor you, then there's no business of such arm of government in place. Otherwise, if in any case that you feel that actually you are at any point affected by any verdict of the court, there is always option of appeal. That's why you have High Court, you have Appeal Court, and you have the Supreme. And I think that in fact, if there is in any case that your interest has been driven off by maybe High Court, then you have a room to appeal to the Appeal Court. But if the High Court and Appeal Court and Supreme finds the same verdict, then you must find yourself on the opposite. And therefore, I don't think that we are supposed to molest and override courts the same way the parliament is being taken through. The parliament today is not independent. And nobody can stand here and tell us the parliament is independent. It is overridden by the executive, molested by executive. Yes, and nobody can stand to tell you that in fact he votes with his conscience. It is party-driven interest. This is not the case. Should be. People should know they are elected by their people to represent them in those houses, to protect their interests, but not individual interests. It is unfair if we are going to override parliament, we override judiciary, and then we are turning back to imperial president.
Okay.
It is unfair, and this is not the route to go.
Fred, just allow me a minute. We must be honest with ourselves. First of all, my friend here, Gakuya, is a member of parliament. He has voted on several issues, and we have voted differently. And he says that we do not vote with our conscience. So when he votes with his conscience, that's his conscience. But when I vote with my conscience, that's not my conscience, it's the president's conscience. When he's accused of corruption in his CDF and is taken to court, then the courts are bad. When the courts rule against him, when he's involved in corruption for CDF, then the courts are bad. When the courts rule that, first of all, the other day, these things were canvassed as we watched in High Court. You know, the High Court in Kirinyaga had stopped what was a political process, as envisaged in the Constitution. Then it was canvassed, and then the same court, with a 3-judge bench, overturned the decision that was done in Kirinyaga. At that point, when the court order is given in Kirinyaga, then the courts are good. When a 3-judge bench sits in Nairobi and overturns that stoppage of the stay of the proceedings, then the court is bad. I think we must understand that the lens from which we view the law will always be subjective, depending on where you sit. But we must allow the courts to do their work.
And if you're not happy, you seek redress.
And you seek redress. And you know, in some of these cases that the appellate courts, both the Court of Appeal, depending on where the issue came from, both the High Court, Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, as appellate courts, are not interested in facts. They just deal with matters of law. And therefore, we can't decide when the law is good, when the courts are good, and when they're bad, depending on where we sit.
Okay.
Yes, Banash. Late, great Justice Brandeis, American jurist and judge, who was a progressive, but explained the meaning of the Constitution of the United States and the judiciary. The judiciary must have reach. It's exactly the opposite to what our president is saying here. The job of the judiciary is to interfere. The job of the judiciary is not to sit somewhere and wait for the society and the principles of government and constitutional government to be thrown out the window and then remain silent. That's not their job. And particularly in an environment like Kenya, where we come from a one-party state, and men and women who are involved in the liberation struggle to change the constitution, which I was a part of. Now we see the things that we thought we had already settled in this country are being opened again. It's as if the clock is being turned back. And I think that it is the political system that we have that is responsible for this thing. I've always argued that this issue of electing a president and a deputy president is absolutely wrong for this country. I've always believed that the National Assembly is the sovereign institution in this country, and that even the president, the prime minister, and all the government officials of this country should come from the National Assembly. And in that way, my honorable friend here on the right can have influence over the policy of the government and where the government is going, because the member of parliament will have fundamental power in that type of constitution. But in the kind of system that we have now, we've adopted the American system, what happens is that the president can do exactly what he wants, when he wants, and how he wants. And he can interfere in any part of the system, because the gusto or the strength for the National Assembly and the Judiciary to resist the executive is very low. Secondly, we're celebrating only 12 years of our Constitution. Yes. Now, if there's anything in this world that the judiciary should be doing in its jurisprudence, is to interpret this Constitution. Mm-hmm. But what other job does the judiciary have if it's not interpreting what this Constitution is saying? And I think that this kind of talk by the president is telling us exactly where his thinking is as far as the separation of powers is concerned, and where the republic should go. He wants it to go the autocratic way. He wants the one-man show. He wants his way or the highway, and he's lecturing the judiciary, but in a roundabout way. I think we should respect our Constitution. I think we should respect the separation of powers. Mm-hmm. And the president must know that without this judiciary, we will be in civil conflict.
And let's focus on the performance of the Supreme Court briefly.
Just a minute, just a minute.
Briefly,
it's very important to and I respectfully disagree with Hashi. He must understand that we have two systems of laws. We practice common law. And in our common law, unlike the civil law that is mentioning here, our courts are not inquisitive. If we happen here, if a judge sees me slapping him and he's here, and when we go to court, that is not brought here, our courts in common law are not inquisitive. That is purely what it is. If you want to change our law from common law to civil law, then we first do it and we change our constitution to reflect the same. Okay. But for what we have right now, then the example is given here doesn't carry.
Okay.
And you see, we also have...
I want to give Bwana Mutambu an opportunity to speak also.
Yes, a quick briefly. The common law is the operational law of the judiciary. The constitution is an entirely different matter. A constitution expresses what the will of the people are, what is the sovereign republic, what are the laws that should be followed. I think that distinction should...
Let's bring Bwana Mutambu into this conversation. Bwana Mutambu.
I think when we debate with emotions or with the notion of who do I support and who should be right, I think it is wrong. Right. Again, we need to ask ourselves at what point or what angle are we looking at these matters? At what point do we say that the judiciary has overreached itself? Right? Because the same constitution. In litigation, there are two parties. There's the one who went to court and there's a respondent. There's the person who is... And both of them, they are protected by the same constitution. Whether you are the one who went to sue or whether you are the one who is sued, you have equal rights before the court. All right? And it will not be that because I'm the one who went to court, I should be listened to or anything should go as my wish. All right? And if the law protects both of them and somebody goes to court, and maybe court stops these proceedings, like now we are here, and the court says, no, stop that debate, because somebody has gone to court and must be heard. It cannot be interpreted that the court is now overreaching. The court is basically giving this other party their constitutional right to be heard. And in that context, if somebody feels maybe the court was unfair to stop me from what I was doing with, then it is the constitution which says that. It is legally. If I go to complain about this building, you are building this place, and I got to complain, and the court says, no, you just continue building, and we will hear him. Okay? Then what will be the outcome if the court now decides that that building is built there illegally? What will... I mean, it is also protecting you. Okay. Because you may end up building, and then at the end of the day, the decision comes the other way around. So my take on this is that we need to understand the judges or the courts are basically interpreting the law, and the law is not based on executive or any other person. It is equal to both parties.
Now, because the focus is on the Supreme Court and not the entire judiciary, the 12 years of the Supreme Court, 3 Chief Justices later, are we a better lot? Are we in a better space? We've seen and heard the Supreme Court adjudicate on very serious matter and give some very serious interpretation of the law, including annulling a presidential election, Bwana. What is your assessment of the Supreme Court so far, 12 years on?
In the moment, let me say, taking a concern that this country, before the new constitution, there was a lot of interference with the outcomes of court decisions. And that's why that old constitution had empowered an imperial president to influence even the decisions of the court. And I would say we are in a miles ahead after the birth of this new constitution, that you can find decisions made very independently as per the law. And I would say that, in fact, as much as sometimes we feel judiciary is somehow threatened, just to make sure that they can make decisions to suit, let me say, the state. We have seen a Chief Justice in this Supreme Court standing firm, and especially the first one, under Chief Justice Mutunga. We have also seen Maraga standing very firm and also a ruling an election of a sitting president. This, to me, that was a very strong statement that we have grown to that level. And we can embrace our courts that they have also grown to that level. They can make such magnitude decision without fear or favor. So, as we speak today, my urge is that the route we are taking is that we on a crossroad where our judiciary may get into trap and might get into what we call state capture. This is an element where we should pray that, in fact, we should not get to that direction.
Okay.
Because the country will be at a banana republic.
Okay. Your assessment of the Supreme Court 12 years.
Patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, James once said. Now, I think that we have a conservative Supreme Court justice, and we had progressive, back-to-back progressive Chief Justices. And we've got a conservative one now who wants to strictly adhere to the letter of the law. The other two Chief Justices were much more activists who interpreted the Constitution in favor of a progressive agenda for the country. It's important for us who are public intellectuals to actually look at one very important issue, that the Constitution that we wrote, and I was part of the people who helped write that Constitution, is that the Constitution is a living document. It's not a dead document. It's not a letter. It is a living document that makes our lives and our experience as Kenyans seek what is called the rule of law and justice in the corridors of the magistrates. And I think that that is at the core of our constitutional spirit. And if we do not jealously guard our Constitution and reject anybody who tries to abuse it, anybody who tries to overthrow it, I think that we are going to be the worst off, and we know where we came from. I've slept in all the police stations in this country. I've nearly lost my life, as you know, Fred, many times over making Kenya a better country. And I think it's very important that we continue defending this Constitution so that we can never get the imperial presidency that the member from Embakasi is speaking about.
Okay. Bwana Kagombe, your assessment of the Supreme Court for the last 12 years?
The Supreme Court in the last 12 years has handled many cases. I think about nearly 700 cases. Some of them have been very interesting. I mean, if you remember the Maraga's, reversal of the election of 2017, the abolition of the death sentence as seen in Section 204 of the Penal Code. There has been decisions that have been learned. I mean, the issues of some presumption of marriage by cohabitation. They've been very serious precedents and very serious jurisprudence that has been formed at the court of at the apex court. And I think they've done a good job, especially because we as Kenyans are very litigious, and that's our nature. Because being a young and progressive democracy, we came up with the document that has a lot to be interpreted, and our Constitution is very young. You've just seen, it was demonstrated to us that we still have a long way to go in giving meat and creating jurisprudence and creating precedents in our courts and even at the National Assembly and Senate. We have a lot of work to do to make our Constitution a living document. I have a feeling that for our Constitution to give us proper remedy to all our problems, we will need some 50, 60, going to 100 years of this Constitution. And at some point, we'll need to sit and review it, depending on how the people feel. And if you remember when we were passing this Constitution in 2010, because we had tried so many times from 2003 all the way, even President Kibaki himself said, we know that this document is not perfect, but for now, it will suffice as we grow and as we amend it and as we create better laws that's around it. So I would say that the Apex Court or the Supreme Court has done a good job in creating jurisprudence. And it's not all the time that the rulings of the court will favor us and will make us very happy, because at times depending on the circumstances and how the people see the law, then there'll be two sides to the law. And that's why we, in the court of law, that's why the bar is allowed to come and canvass an issue that to you, it looks very straightforward, but you hear the arguments of this side and you're like, that's correct. You hear the argument of the other side and you're like, okay, that's also correct. And you do not need emotions. It's just English as it has been put in the Constitution. And then we avoid semantics. And as we say, look at the spirit of our Constitution. And all the time when acting, for everybody who is in power and who has a position of influence, we must have public interest at hand.
Yes, but yet the Supreme Court has also received a lot of criticism from people as high as senior counsel in this country. Do you agree with some of that criticism? And what is your assessment of the 12 years of the Supreme Court?
You know, we Kenyans, we read Constitution the way we want, not the way we should be. And coming from that background, it is very easy to criticize the Supreme Court. Remember, we are dealing with a constitution which also gave ourselves some way forward. And in many of articles of this constitution, actually it says, Parliament shall enact a law detailing on how this will work, right? And as we speak today, there are some sections which Parliament has not fulfilled. All right? So when we talk of Supreme Court, we also need to take recognition that it is the same judiciary which pronounced Parliament unconstitutional. Because Parliament had not fulfilled, and that was, I think, the 12th Parliament? It was 12th Parliament, which was, the court declared to be dissolved. But did it happen? It never happened. Why was the Parliament not dissolved after court pronouncing so? All right? So we need to understand that these are human beings who are working under some conditions which for any intellectual or any person to understand that we have a document which has some serious problems. And when you judge them based on that, then we are not being fair to judiciary. Right. We need to understand their thinking and where they are coming from. And if something is pronounced or if something is said to have been done, to be done by Parliament, and Parliament has not done it, then it goes back to judiciary to interpret. In a case, now what do we do? Because Parliament, like the case of impeachment of Kachagwa, okay, there's something which Parliament was to do in terms of public participation. But they never gave clear guidelines on how to handle it. So we had to go back to court and ask, in this situation, what do we do in these circumstances? Well, what do we do? And that's where we found ourselves as Kenyans. And if court made any pronouncement based on a void of what Parliament should have done, we cannot throw stones on them. We need to throw stones to where the law should have come from.
Justice on trial is a big headline on the front page of the Standard this morning. We have about 6 minutes to go. So, gentlemen, I'll give you about a minute and a half each to make your final remarks. And as you do that, you could choose to comment on these other issues. But there's one more story that probably has escaped the attention of many people. And it's a new bill that is sparking fears of state overreach. No, that's a state. As Silas voices, the government could soon have sweeping powers over protests, including deciding when and where they can happen. Under a new law spearheaded by Mbeere North MP Geoffrey Ruku, the proposed Assemblies and Demonstrations Bill 2024 seeks to bar protests on highways and other public spaces, claiming they disrupt public order. Now, there's something before the National Assembly. As you make your final comment.
My thing, the Constitution guarantees us the right to assemble, the right to petition our governors, the right to picket, the right to express ourselves. The Constitution gives us, and we put it in the very heart of the Constitution so that nobody could mess with it. The right to habeas corpus, the cornerstone of the Constitution, our civil and political rights, cornerstone of the Constitution. No, the National Assembly cannot override the Constitution of this country. The Constitution is supreme. And in the very first sentence, it says that the people are the ones who are sovereign. So I think this is a loyalist of the administration who's, they tried the other bill about extension to see how the Kenyan public would react. And there was an uproar. They called the line of the National Assembly until it collapsed. You know, this country has changed and it has moved on. 80% of the people are under 25. You saw they went and took the mace from the National Assembly. These kids are not playing games with us. They want jobs. They want a proper system. They want to be able to do the things that their dreams say, talk about. And the usual suspects of everyday life in this country has just come to an end. And that will be shown in the coming election in 2027, when there will be the biggest sweep of the politicians in this country we've ever seen.
All right, Wanagabe, go next. Final comments.
One, I would just to state that, in fact, it is the right of the member to bring such a bill. Because as a country, we have also undergone through various number of misuse of these demonstrations, where the demonstrations have sometimes affected businesses. You could find a capital city like Nairobi, when such demonstrations are on, the whole city is closed. And you can imagine what kind of effect is that economically. And most likely, to rethink on where should these demonstrations could take place, to me, is a plus. What I cannot stand for is to demonize the demonstrations, because they are in the law and they are well stated in the Constitution. Picketing is also well protected by the Constitution. But where should this happen? I think, to me, is a good issue, and it's a debate to discuss about. So if it can be done where it cannot bring issues to such element of closing businesses, I think that's what is a plus to me.
Do you feel that it could be probably in defiance of the Constitution, as Bwana Hashi suggests, that the right to picket, to demonstrate, to present petitions is actually ingrained in the Constitution? That telling someone you cannot do it here, you can only do it some specific place. That's an excellent question.
I would say very clearly that, in fact, the law is not casted on a stone. And what happens is the law is just like a shoe that you wear. It can inch you. And once it's important you to look for a better number which can fit you. In this case, that's why laws keep being amended. And I don't think that amending the law is a big issue, because after exercising it, after implementation, you find its flaw and its laws. And once majority decides, because even this particular law that is being brought by a member of parliament, it must face what you call the people, because there has to be that public participation. And I think that what the National Assembly and the Senate should do is to make sure that they reflect in totality the sentiments of the people during that public participation. That weight should carry itself to that particular law that's about to be amended. If people decide that that is not an election, that should stop there. If the people decide that's a good way to go, then that's a plus to me.
You know, we are just discussing our jurisprudence. We've been saying that we were caught in a situation where the courts so that you can impeach a deputy president or a president. It didn't give us, it's not very well articulated. It's not eloquent. So we are saying that we are a very young democracy and we need to create laws.
I agree with that.
If someone comes and demonstrates at your business, like I have a business in Nairobi, or someone comes and decides to demonstrate in the studio, there's a problem. So we're saying we must have further legislation that guides us into how to do things properly, as long as that law has been subjected to the people, and properly so that it's not just done for it to be seen to be done. If the people agree, because we also have the people at any demonstrations, we have people who are demonstrating and we have people who are suffering. A lot of people have lost lives, people have lost businesses. If you talk to those people and you tell them the demonstrations are good, they will tell you no. We need to have a better way of doing it. So I think everybody, as we say that the law, depending on where you sit, you need to look at this thing objectively. And I will tell you that there are people who have suffered every time there is maandamano, every time there is protest, every time there is picketing, because, we've been infiltrated. So I find nothing wrong with the honorable member bringing a bill and saying, we need to relook into this and say, do we need proper and further legislation that says, okay, this is how to do picketing? And because the rights of any right that is guaranteed to you in the Constitution has an end, and it ends where my rights begin. So if I have a business, if I need to travel, if I need, you could be protesting about something that I am not interested in. And it's not everything that affects all Kenyans. So you have your right to demonstrate, and I have my right to do business. So those things must be looked at, and we do not have proper law that governs that space. So for the honorable member to bring that bill, I think it is perfectly in order so that we can verse it in studios, we can verse it outside, we can verse it and go and talk to the business people and to public participation, and then we come up with a way forward. I don't think it is proper to anticipate debate because it has not been canvassed. Once it is canvassed and we're given the right direction by the people, it shall be followed. And it will go on to create better jurisprudence and better laws for our country.
In other countries, like America, where I was, this is what happens. That there are areas which are set for demonstration. But you know, we also need to ask ourselves some few questions. When you propose a law, you also need to think on implementing it, right? What would be the effects? When I say that people should not interfere with Uhuru Highway, now you are denying that person the right to use Uhuru Highway because Uhuru Highway is not made only for cars. Even for people can walk there. So when you tell me not to interfere with the Uhuru Highway or Mombasa Road, and that is my route to town. Now, if a police officer finds me that day of demonstration on the Uhuru Highway, they will arrest me because there is a law which has been made not to interfere with the Uhuru Highway. So we need to think before we even put an ink on that law. What does it say and what would be the effect to also to the people you are trying to protect? You see, when you allow people to drink, you must also allow them to misbehave because when you are drunk, you can misbehave. When you allowed them to drink, so you allow them to misbehave. So if you allow them to demonstrate, you also must also allow them to use the facilities which are there because I'm a human being and I'm allowed by the Constitution to use these facilities. So when you say that nobody should use this road or should demonstrate here, then we need to ask ourselves, if I want to demonstrate or if I want to present a petition, will I fly and go and land to that office or I'll have to walk? And when I'm walking, I'm being joined by another person and another. And by the time we reach the place, we may be thousands of us. So would we be seen as if we are demonstrating in Uhuru Highway or we are on our way to present the petition? So we need to think through before acting or before making the law.
The government could soon have sweeping powers over protests, including deciding when and where they can happen. Under a new law spearheaded by Mbeere North MP Geoffrey Ruko. I'm reading page 4 of the Standard. I'm not making anything up. A new bill sparked fears of state overreach and silenced voices. The proposed Assemblies and Demonstrations Bill 2024 seeks to bar protests on highways and other public spaces, and it will grant, if passed, the CS for Interior authority to set rules on how demonstrations are conducted. These are just some of the headlines in our dailies today. Justice on trial is a big headline on the front page of the Standard. Historic polls, the big headline on the Daily Nation. 200 Bunge staff with fake papers sent home. The Star went completely with a different headline today. The People Daily talked about 20 hospitals where you're most likely to die. That's the front page of the People Daily this morning. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen.
You're very welcome. Asante sana.
Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy expert. Gigi Kagombe, MP Getundu South. Joe Mutambo, former MP Mwingi Central, and James Gakuya, MP Embakasi North. Our panelists this morning on State of the Nation. Remember, still counting down to the US elections, 5 hours, 55 minutes before the polls open. It is a big story, not just in Kenya, across the globe. Will it be Donald Trump or Kamala Harris as the 47th president of the United States? A lot more conversations coming up after the break, including on matters prenup agreements in case of marriage. My name is